North Drive. I have been a resident of Cecil Township now for going on 4 years. A little bit more history there. I've been working in South Point for going on 9 years. I'm a proud neighbor here in Cecil Township, but I'm also a very proud member of the oil and gas industry workforce. And I can echo what Diana said here this evening when she talked about what this industry has meant to our communities. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for oil and gas. And despite the fact that I know there are very passionate opinions in this room, I think it's safe to say that many of us wouldn't be here if it weren't for oil and gas and from a very functional standpoint. The backbone of this local economy is the backbone of this local economy.
I'm going to ask that you address the board.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
The backbone of our local economy has been built on this industry over the course of the past decade and more. And I think that as a resident of Cecil Township, I want to ensure that my voice is heard in support for this industry here. There's a lot that a municipality can do to ensure that oil and gas is developed responsibly and safely, and I've seen it done in many, many cases. As Diana was mentioning, the development has been going on here for well over a decade, and it's been done safely, and we have some very excellent operators here who want to bring that excitement to Cecil Township. And I hope that the township will welcome them and work collectively with them, as well as the communities at stake. So thank you for your time. And again, my name is Kim Price.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Hoffman from 3005 Sir Charles Drive in the Maplewood neighborhood. I understand we can't ask questions to the board tonight, but I would ask you please confirm some information I have so I can make sure it's accurate. That 500 feet is the current setback for structures in Cecil Township.
You're going to speak up.
With the exception of two.
Can you, sometimes if you pull out the microphone and hold it, it's easier. There you go.
The information I'd like to confirm just before I make my statement is that 500 feet is the current setback for structures in Cecil Township, with the exception of schools where that setback is 2,000 feet.
That is correct.
Thank you. I stood at this podium before, I'll address the board,
Thank you.
and told you how I moved here to Cecil Township with my wife for our life savings into a home, and then shortly after found out about a fracking operation in our backyard. I've been looking at these setbacks and reviewing ordinances over the weekend, and coming across this discrepancy between 500 feet for our homes versus 2,000 feet for our schools. And if I could ask the board a question, the question I would ask is why is that discrepancy there, and what was the logic that went into it when it was first established?
I can somewhat answer that. I mean, I should say none of us. Only one person that currently sits on the board was on the board at the time that ordinance was written. So I don't think that there's any of us that could really answer that question, even if we wanted to.
Just historically, there's not, let's summarize why there's a discrepancy.
If you just want to continue with your remarks.
So with that discrepancy, again, 2,000 feet for schools, 500 feet for our homes, I looked into how long do our children actually spend in school. And the truth is that in their first 18 years of life, they spend about 16,380 school hours on school campuses. That sounds like a lot. And that may help explain why we have larger setbacks for schools to protect our children, our most vulnerable population, in a place where they spend a lot of time. If we look at the bigger picture, that number of school hours is only 16% of their waking hours, between 0 and 18 years old. That means the other 84% of children's time is spent out of the school, mainly at home, where they are far more likely to spend time outside breathing that air after school hours, on the weekends, and during summers. I'd also urge you to consider the early developmental years before school begins, when our toddlers, infants, newborns, and expectant mothers spend most time at home. On that note, please also consider our elderly, whose immune systems are also more susceptible to air pollutants and spend the majority of their time in our homes. And I'll conclude with saying that if we believe that 2,000 feet is an adequate setback to protect the most vulnerable of our population, then why should we not accept anything less than 2,000 feet for the structures where this very same vulnerable population spends the vast majority of their lives, and that is their homes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Walker, and I'm a 50-plus year resident of Cecil Township. My wife Patty and I raised our children for 37 years on Ricing Road. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. I just want to make sure everybody can hear.
And I am a leaseholder, so I'll state that, I'll provide that information. I come here today as a resident to share my thoughts and opinion on the subject of Marcellus drilling. For the record, I would like to ask, and I understand the question thing, I'd like to ask what prompted this review or this actual workshop for the ordinance review. I mean, how did this all?
I can answer that question, although I'll cut into your time speaking.
Okay. Make it quick.
Oh, sorry. I recently took over as chairperson. A lot of our ordinances haven't been reviewed in a lot of time, so I had a conversation with several people, our township manager, and said, what are the top 3 complaints of ordinances that we get the most complaints on? Oil and gas, construction work on Sundays, fire code ordinance.
Okay, very good, thank you. I'm sure all of you have electricity that comes into your homes. That allows you to live comfortably in that home. And I'm sure some of you also have gas heat that you use, or gas that you use for heat and cooking. With that said, I would like to ask a simple question. What do you think makes that possible? Where do you think these resources come from? The answer to that question is they come from where they exist. And I'm happy to say that they exist in abundance here in southwestern PA and specifically in Cecil Township. I understand that everybody likes to enjoy the comforts of these resources provided, but they want to do this with no inconvenience to them or their surrounding area. Not in my backyard, put it in theirs.
That's right.
As I previously mentioned, this is not always practical, or as I previously mentioned, this is not always practical or possible because of where the resources they are. When I spoke before this board last time, I explained how I can relate to how some of these residents feel, as I feel the same way about residential development, toll roads, and etc. in the township. That's what some call progress. Also, although some would argue that urban sprawl has its benefits, with homeowners and commercial ventures that move into the area and often provide additional revenue to local governments in the form of property taxes and sales taxes. However, such development often produces drains on local environmental resources, shifts an economic burden of development to longtime residents, increases car dependency and energy costs, and diminishes the overall community's character. I do find it ironic that a person or a family would move to Cecil Township with what I assume is to be their quest to live in a rural community with farms, green fields, nature, but at the same time contribute to the destruction of these same sought-after features within our township to much more permanent and greater extent than a well pad. On the subject of taxes, Commissioner Ira Vaughn touched on this. The residents have not complained about the roughly $2 million in impact fees they have received or the additional tax revenue that's obtained from leaseholders signing bonuses and or royalties. I've done some research. And came up with some very rough estimates of roughly 40% of the 16,000 acres in Cecil Township currently under lease. I do not believe it is right or fair that the township eliminate the industry from tapping this much needed and available resource, while at the same time depriving land and mineral owners from obtaining revenue from their investments. I feel range the residents and state regulatory agencies have evolved over time. Along with this, range has tried to be a good neighbor and has gone out of the way to work with all parties. We cannot and should not eliminate drilling in the township, which I believe is the goal, could be the goal of the board and or some of the residents. The landowners with mineral rights be represented equally. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Nicole Rosito, and I live at 1524 High Road in Jefferson Hills, Pennsylvania.
If you're not a Cecil Township resident, we're only accepting comments.
You're only accepting comments. I just,
At the end of the meeting, if there's time, we'll allow.
I'm a newly elected council person over there, so all I wanted to do was open the line of communication between our boroughs.
I appreciate it, and we can get your information. Thank you.
Michelle Stonemark, 40 North DePauli. I have a brief statement I'm going to read first, and then I'm going to kind of, go off a little bit, so, on my own. One thing that I want the board to keep in mind is that we are not the only community that is facing this issue of should we update our oil and gas ordinance. We are not alone in this. There are communities who have done before it. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. These communities have invested time and money into their important ordinance updates, and we should use them as a basis for our own township updates. And I appreciate Commissioner being here this evening, but as she's aware and other people are aware that these ordinances have been going through the county planning commissions and have been approved. So we need to make sure that we are taking these other communities' ordinances into consideration as well and using them as a sort of blueprint going forward. I just think it's something that I want you guys all to keep in mind. And with that, I do have a copy of a recent ordinance that was passed in Indiana Township, which is in Allegheny County. And some of the things that I really liked about this ordinance were the studies that they required prior to any application being approved. They required a traffic study, a noise management plan, an environmental impact analysis, an air quality study, a hydrological study, a pre-development and post-development soil testing study. These are the kind of things that we need to have in place, so not only to prepare residents surrounding the well pad, but it'll also have give us a baseline of what is currently there prior to the commencement of any oil and gas operations, which is going to do nothing except protect this township from any kind of negligence. Some of the other things that I enjoyed about that, and I think will go also to the purpose of protecting the township, which is really what we're here to do, is protect the health, safety, and welfare of the township. And I want to keep reminding you guys of that you are elected by the residents. You are elected by the residents to protect their health, safety, and welfare. That is primarily your job. So, with that being said, some of the other parts of this ordinance that I really liked, and let me flip to that page. They require an insurance policy on their well pad. Now, I'm pretty sure that we require Range to have, there's for the well pad that I'm familiar with, we require them to have $1 million insurance policy, indemnity policy, that indemnifies and express negligence. I mean, you can read through it, I'm going to give you guys all a copy of it. But this township requires $25 million, so that when something happens, and it requires $25 million per site, not as a total, whereas I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Cecil Township currently requires $1 million per operator. And like I said, that might be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, that's what it is. This is $25 million per occurrence. So, meaning that anything that would come through, an accident that would happen, any kind of disaster that would happen, that their insurance didn't cover, it wouldn't be up to the taxpayers to pick up the rest of the bill. They'd be required to up to $25 million. Something else that I really liked, and I think, with everything that's been going on around our house, that I really liked about this, is that the conditional use approval is non-transferable, without consent from the Board of Supervisors, and automatically terminates unless extended and if drilling is not commenced within a year from the approval. Because within the 2 years that Range applied for the made their application here in